is able to hold the zone. Suter cuts to the middle for Minnesota. Drops to the trailing Zucker. On the backhand, they score! Eric Staal off the feet from Zucker.
Sealer able to filter it down for Eriksson. Shakes away from Miller and Sullivan score! Marcus Foligno set up by Joel Eriksson.
Staal to the outside. Ryan Suter has room. There's Zucker. There's a goal! Jason Zucker!
Donato into the corner. Suter centers for Parisi. He scores!
Hey everyone, and welcome to the WildTakes podcast. I am Zane, and I am here with Jake, and we are here to talk the Wild season preview today. We are sponsored by 10,000 Takes. The weather is cold enough, so why have cold takes? Isn't that right, Jake?
Totally. It gets way too damn cold here. We already have too much ice, okay? We're the state of hockey. We don't need any cold takes, okay? Everything is hot here. Everything is hot takes.
And I'm holding you to that. Not myself. I'm holding you to it, though.
Oh, I mean, we both need to have some hot takes. You can't rely on me for being the only one to have hot takes. We all need to be contributors here, okay?
I'll try my best
100%.
to do my part. So today we're going to be talking the Wild season preview. We're going to go over last season, and then we're going to talk off season, and then we're going to do like a brief roster overview and kind of go from there. So we'll start off by recapping last season, where the Minnesota Wild finished with a record of 37, 36, and 9. Jakes, what were your thoughts on last year's Minnesota Wild?
When you said that record, I just think of one word, just gross. It was just you finished last in the Central Division, which I think is by far probably the most balanced division. Obviously now with St. Louis, the Blues obviously winning the Stanley Cup, it's a very tough division, and the Wild just totally collapsed near the end of the year. I don't think it helped losing Matt Dumba. That really did not help them in the long run, because they start off the season okay, just like a typical Wild start to the season, but then they always come back and get fired up. They go on a little bit of a hot streak to end the year, around January throughout the end of the season, but they really just tanked, at the end of February throughout, to the end of the season, and just couldn't score, is the big thing. They just couldn't score. It was just hard to see them play, or to watch them. It was a hard season to watch overall, especially near the end. It was just an utter collapse. It was just kind of disgusting to watch them play. It was just like, this is not the Wild we've seen in the previous 6 years.
And I think why it made us so mad as well is because the Wild really did actually start off pretty well. At the end of October, they had a record of 7 wins, 3 losses, and then 2 overtime losses.
Yeah.
At the end of November, they were 14-9-2. So I mean, after the first 2 months, it's like, it's not the greatest, but like you're looking like a playoff team. Then all of a sudden, December came around, and they ended up going 4-8-1 in that month, and they just never recovered from that point out. Just like you said earlier, the team couldn't score goals. They finished 28th out of the 31 teams in the NHL in goals scored, which is just absolutely embarrassing, I think, anyways.
Yeah, I think it was just so bad to watch at times. Like, it was just like, and on top of that, like, Dubnyk really didn't look great on that last stretch of the season, not putting up great stats, letting in a lot of goals, letting up 4 to 5 goals in a game, and we would, only put up 2 or 3 goals, and it's like we just couldn't find ways to score. We couldn't get inside in the slot. We just couldn't score. And I know there's a few games. I noticed notably, I think it was the Philadelphia game. I think last March, it was in March at some point, where we had like a 3-1 lead or 4-1 lead and blew it and lost 5-4. And that happened a few times near the end of the season, where we just blew leads too against bad teams. I think it also happened to New Jersey last year, where I think we're up 3-1 or something like that going into the second period and ended up blowing the game. It's like, it was just embarrassing to watch, and they couldn't find ways to score. And, on top of that, they were, leaving points out on the ice by not being able to capitalize in overtime, losing a lot of games in overtime, especially in that last stretch of the season.
That's
they just couldn't
figure for a long time too.
Yeah. They just seemed to, ever since they went to 3-on-3 overtime, it's like the Wild had never been able to figure it out, how to play in that overtime style.
And going back to Dubnyk too, it really seems like he can make the saves that he's not supposed to make, but the routine saves, he sometimes just seems like he has a brain issue and just lets in some really easy goals.
Yeah, I noticed that a couple of times where it's like a low puck and it bounces. Sometimes it's I'll give him like the benefit of the doubt on some of them, like they're just weird deflections or whatever. But there's just a lot of them that I feel go like right under his pad, and then he's always looking back or looking at the ref like there should be I feel like almost every time he let in a goal, it's like he was always like looking at the ref, arguing with the ref, like there should have been some sort of goalie interference or something like that, and it's just almost like he couldn't mentally, forget about the goals if he let a bad one in, and it's just kind of, you just got to get over it. And, it just looks like that mental state, like it really bothered him. Like he got really flustered after a goal.
Yeah, I've never really seen a goalie like kind of look to the ref or complain after goals as much as Dubnyk has the last few years,
Yeah, it's a little weird. I noticed that too. It's kind of reminds me of like some basketball players driving the lane, and every time they get called a foul on them, they clearly have their hands wrapped around the guy with the basketball. But then as soon as the whistle blows, they put their hands up like nothing happened. What did I do? So it's kind of like Dubnyk. I mean, it's not like a hard comparison, but it's like every time a goal goes in, it's like he's looking for something else that went wrong, or a player just barely hits him on the pad and he's looking for the goalie interference. It's like Dubnyk, you just got to get behind it and go on to the next play. And I think that definitely happens with him, especially on those stretches where he has inconsistencies, where he does win games. He will win 5 or 6 games, maybe even, win 4 of 6 games, or go, win 8 of 10 games, and, have an average of only allowing like 2 goals or maybe even less. And then you'll have another stretch of 10 games where he maybe wins only 4 or 5 and allows almost 4 goals a game. And in those games, you can definitely see him getting flustered and frustrated after he lets in a couple of goals, and I think he lets it get to him. But he needs to figure out to calm down. But it might also be in a sense of, he's been going down here in the last few years, that it might be a matter of he's just getting older and he's losing his, his luster. He's losing his magic that he's had when he was here in his first season.
And what you're really pretty much saying is that we need consistency from Dubnyk this coming year, and I wholeheartedly agree. I was looking at the points, the point leaders for last year.
Yeah.
Some really interesting things stuck out to me. So obviously last year, Parisi led the team with 61 points. Stahl was second with 52, and then Mikael Granlund was actually third on the team in points with 49 points.
And he played
at the trade deadline. Leading the team in goals, obviously, was Parisi. The second was Stahl. Third was Zucker. And then fourth was Granlund in goals for the team in the year. And then when it comes to assists, Granlund was second in the whole entire year last year for the Minnesota Wild in assists. So that just really shows how little offensive production they got from their team.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's an insane stat because, I mean, what was it, 49 games played that Granlund played here last season?
Yeah,
I mean, that's just a little over half of the season, and he's literally topping out in some of our offensive stats. It's like that also shows no one else is stepping up, and someone else has to step up. And I quite frankly didn't think we had that last year. And you look at that, and like Parisi had another good year. He looked pretty good coming off the injury of the year before, where he was out for almost half of the season. He looked good. Suter looked good, but it's just sad when you just see Granlund, topping out on some of those stats. We needed someone to fill his shoes. Although Granlund was struggling there, it just kind of shows our offensive production just wasn't there last year, and that's something that needs to change going forward.
For sure. Someone who was traded a little bit before the deadline ended up being third in the team in points, second in assists, and fourth in goals. That is absolutely crazy, if you ask me.
Oh, I would say. I mean, that like I said, that needs to change going into this year, and it needs to start. We need to see some sort of optimism, in the first game on Thursday at Nashville, which is going to be a tough game. But, I mean, I want to see something. I want to see some, kind of get optimism. See some players that could step up this year and fill those roles in scoring and finding ways to create plays and assists. And as much as Koivu is getting older and might be a cap burden right now, he's a guy that is a smart player that can create some of those plays, create some of those assists, and that can also, give some key teaching points to some of these younger players we have on the team. So I'm hoping something happens, on Thursday to kind of give us some hope and to be like, okay, that guy's going to come out and and possibly be a goal scorer for us this year, or create some plays in terms of assists, or a few guys, not just one guy, because it was Granlund last year and he wasn't even here the whole year. So we need a little bit of hope coming out of that first game.
And obviously, for looking back at last year, yeah, the offensive production wasn't that great, but you could also blame it on a few factors. One, Matt Dumba and Mikko Koivu were injured for large parts of the year. I think Dumba only played 32 games all of last year.
Yeah.
So if you have, Dumba's going to be your number one goal scoring defenseman, and Koivu he's not going to be like the best goal scorer, but he will get you, 15 in a year. And Wild could have used that production last year. But I think even more of an issue was some of the trades Fenton made that really kind of made the team kind of lose chemistry and not really able to kind of get together coming forward. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I didn't think, I don't know what he was, when I saw the notification come out about trading Nino Niederreiter for Victor Rask, I was like, who's Victor Rask? That's the first thing I asked. I'm like, who is this player? And I looked him up, and maybe he's some stud center or something. And like, he barely has any stats. He doesn't have good points, or he doesn't have good stats, I should say. And I know Niederreiter, it was kind of bound he was going to be traded. I think there was rumors going on even before last season that, if he doesn't produce, we might be trading him or getting rid of him to, help cap space, or kind of gain some more cap space to, build the team for the future. But come on, trading him for Victor Rask. Fenton didn't even send a scout down there to look at him before we traded for him. So I think that was a completely stupid trade for him. I think that was just a quick trade that he knew he could do right away, just so he could, I don't know, try to just get rid of him and start building up cap space. So I think that was completely idiotic.
I can't justify that trade at all. No way in hell is Nino Niederreiter like he is not. He's way better than Victor Rask. They're not on the same level. And then on top of that, the cap space, I think they only cleared barely over $1 million a year.
I know.
Cap space. And on top of that, even Victor Rask, who isn't even going to make the roster this year, I'm not going to make the starting roster. He's probably going to be a healthy scratch. He's getting paid $4 million the next 3 years to be a healthy scratch for the Wild. So that was definitely a horrible, horrible trade.
Yeah, I think that was it was just terrible. I think that we didn't get a good guy in return, and it was just kind of like, what are you doing? I know Niederreiter, he was very disappointing there. He definitely wasn't worth the money to how he's producing on the ice. But might as well just keep him if you're going to get a guy like Victor Rask. What are you doing?
A 5th round, 6th round, even a 7th round pick would have been better than taking on that contract.
Yeah, I've already thought about joking, like, get rid of Rask and trade him for a 7th round pick or something. But I don't.
The teams won't do that because of that contract. They really won't.
I know, with that contract, they almost have to keep him. So it's kind of it's just frustrating to see that. Although I didn't mind so much the Granlund Fiala trade, as much as I like Granlund as a player. I like his personality. I think he was a great player that fit in with the Wild, but he was kind of, we knew he probably wasn't going to be here for at least another year or two, being how he was producing and how much money he would have wanted in the next contract. So it was kind of, you kind of saw it coming. You just didn't know if Fenton was going to pull the trigger on it for sure. But I think it's hard to say exactly if that is going to be a worth it trade, being that Fiala is still so young, but he definitely has potential. And I think it does add, it makes us a younger team. It adds a little more talent and a little more speed to the team, being he's so young, and adds a little more life to the team. But it's definitely, we'll have to wait and see how that trade really pans out. And we can start seeing that, on Thursday night, to see how Fiala does against his former team.
One thing that I really didn't like about those trades last year, I'm not mad with the returns we got for Granlund or for Coyle. I think both Fiala and both Ryan Donato both can be really, really great players, and they honestly could maybe one day be elite and really help us out. What really upsetted me, though, was that both Bruce Boudreau and the Wild owner Craig Leopold, they both were dead set on making the playoffs. Midway through the year, made the playoffs. They could have, instead of trading for young players with potential, they could have maybe traded up and try to get some superstar to help the team like fortify a playoff spot. Instead, they traded down for prospects, and it was definitely like they pretty much gave the season away at that point, because as good as Fiala and Donato are, they last year anyways, they weren't ready to be guys yet.
Yeah, I get that, because I think that we probably could have made the playoffs if we, you keep a guy like Niederreiter and Granlund. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, you have to look at it in Paul Fenton's shoes in the sense that the Wild have been trying that over the last 6 years with that roster, and we've got eliminated in the first round. So that's the other side of it, in that sense that we have made the playoffs with these guys and definitely could, but will we make it past the first round again this year? And or last season. And I think people are looking at it that I think in the previous years, we traded midway through the season for those quote unquote superstars or those depth players that could boost our roster into the playoffs, and they end up doing nothing in the playoffs. So I think they were doing a different approach in the end to see if they could, I wouldn't say a different approach to try to make the playoffs, but I think they were saying like Fenton was going a different route. Let's just build up cap space, get some young players now when we can get them, and kind of play maybe for the playoffs, but play more into the future. But I guess I would sit more on the side that we should, have kept them to try to make a push for the playoffs, even though we've been very unsuccessful in the playoffs with that roster in the past.
Mm-hmm. So my main argument with the situation then pretty much is that there is no argument that Charlie Coyle, Niederreiter, and Granlund were absolutely core players of the Minnesota Wild. And to trade all three of them like that in a really quick period of time, that is 100% like we're not making the playoffs because the chemistry is not going to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think as soon as that happened, I really think it did not sit well with the head coach, Bruce Boudreau, and I really think it really made people in the whole organization unhappy. So, there could be a whole nother argument that those trades ruined morale and maybe could have even impacted the team even beyond last season and even onto this season. We will see. I mean, it might not.
Exactly. And I think obviously Bruce Boudreau was upset about it. I think because you could tell he was just frustrated about it, but he was also the one saying that I think he said like a month or two before, or like a month and a half before the season or something, that we are making the playoffs. I guarantee you that. I promise you that. And that kind of goes on the fact that, I had the mentality that we're going to make the playoffs. And that kind of goes back with, he probably wished he would have kept that main roster together. And I think my perspective is, I think at some point we would have had to have gotten rid of him or breaking up this roster at some point if we, since we haven't been successful in the playoffs, losing in the first round for 6 or 7 years. I think eventually we would have needed to break those guys up. But at the middle of last season, I don't know about that. But I think I was more sitting in the boat of we should wait to see how this season pans out and then kind of go from there in the off season. Yeah. But then again, the argument is there, well, could we get the guys we'd want like Fiala and Donato? Then we probably could have. But it's just, I think it came down to Fenton just pulling the trigger early, but now he's gone. So, I mean, obviously, he might have made the wrong decision and in the eyes of the owner and especially Craig Leopold, because he has the full say on whether or not Fenton keeps his job or not. And obviously he wasn't satisfied with what he was doing with the Wild.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually a really good segue into Minnesota Wild's offseason, if you kind of want to lead us into that.
Yeah. So of course, the first big milestone, I guess I would say, or the biggest part of the offseason, the first big part of it is the NFL draft. Oh my gosh. NHL draft. NFL draft's in April. This is in June. So the Wild had eight draft picks total. Of course, their number one, not the number one overall pick, but their first round pick was Matt Boldy, who I like as a pick. I mean, he came out of the U.S. National Under 18 team. In 64 games, he had 33 goals, 48 assists, 81 points. I mean, that's pretty good over a 64 game stretch. And they play some good talent on those teams. And it's hard to say. I think he's going to play for Boston College this year. He definitely could be a guy that, depending on how he does at Boston College, he definitely could be that guy where as soon as his season's over in Boston College, we could call him up and play. But I guess it all comes down to seeing how well he plays. It might be a couple years until he, comes up here, and then we feel.
Well, if you had to kind of like guess, do you think that he might sign a contract after this coming season? If you had to guess,
if I had to guess, that's hard to say. But if I had to guess, I think he will.
Okay.
Being where I think we're still I mean, we will have to see how it's so hard to answer that. We'll have to see how the season pans out with some of these roster, but I think, or with the roster how it's set up right now. But I think the Wild will want to utilize a guy like this, add another young guy to the roster that might have some fresh skills and fresh talent to come in with, some of the younger guys like Eriksson, Cunnin, Fiala, and Donato. But it all comes, that's just my personal opinion as of right now. But very well, he could have a down year, or the Wild might be doing really well where they might say, hey, let's leave him for another season. But it all depends on maybe what he wants to do too. They might, if he wants to come out and sign a contract, he's expressing interest and obviously signing a contract after the season's done in college. We might sign him based on he wants to play and he's ready to go. And I think that all comes down to that. But I'm definitely excited for this player, especially in the future with the Wild. It'll be fun to see how he pans out. It's hard to say if he is going to be very good for the Wild at this point, but we'll have to wait and see. I think he was a good first round draft choice, even though it was Paul Fenton, certainly a hell of a lot better pick than last year's first round pick. Who was that player that they picked last year again in the first round that didn't even make the Swedish national team or whatever?
That was what I was writing about. Was 2 years ago. That was with Chuck Fletcher still.
Oh, that was Chuck Fletcher?
No, you're right. Actually, no, the very first pick that Paul Fenton made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never mind. It was like Philip Johansson. He didn't even make like Team Sweden's national team. Like their U21 national team or something that he definitely should have made.
Yeah, being a first round draft pick, I think that's just embarrassing. So I think that's a much better pick to start out the draft. Come this year, even though it's Paul Fenton, I thought that was a good pick. Obviously, he did more homework on this guy than previous year. But other than that, like that was of course their first round pick. I think their most important pick of the draft. But I think they got that guy from Russia. I know we were talking about, we've talked about in the previous few days and before this podcast, Vladislav Verstov. Hopefully I got that name right. He's from Mother Russia. But I know you were saying too, and it makes sense that I think a lot saw is this a move to try to get, Kirill Kaprizov, who you wrote about, trying to get him to come here.
Yeah, I definitely think it is. They've been the whole organization really is kind of relying on Kirill to come over here and to kind of change the organization because he is a next generation talent. He really is. So little moves like this are definitely trying to coax him over to the U.S. and to put on that Minnesota Wild jersey.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they try to make that move to try to, kind of have another Russian player and to kind of connect with, to build a little chemistry before he comes here.
Many Russians right now, do they?
I don't think so. I can't even think of one. I don't even know if they do. I mean, that's a good stat to look at, honestly, to say how many Russians do you have in your hockey team. But yeah, come to think of it, I don't think they do. And I think, and looking into this player, I don't know what stats off my head. He is a generally solid player besides the fact that trying to get him to come here for Kirill Kaprizov. He's definitely a solid Russian-born player that, could come out in a few years. It's hard to say, right now, but sometimes it takes a few of these players. It's not like the NFL draft where they come on and play right away. It takes a few years until you really see him maybe get into a uniform.
Is he currently playing in the KHL?
I believe so.
Yeah, so if he is playing in the KHL, that is the second best league in the world.
Yes.
So he's going to be getting ready for a really physical, really high-level game, and that's going to be perfect because he's not going to take much adjustment time when he does come over to the U.S.
Or I was going to say he's getting that top-notch experience over there, in some of the best hockey. You sometimes see guys come out of these European leagues that are in good shape to play in their NHL ready. So, the KHL,
with the KHL these days are actually swooping up so much Russian talent because they pay NHL like salaries without you having to be an NHL talent.
Right.
So so they're also willing to pay the younger Russians a lot more money than they would make in the US as well to keep them in Russia.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sure they don't have too much of a salary. I'm not too sure about this, but I remember Ilya Kovalchuk was able to sign for way more a year than he could have in NHL due to the current agreement.
Yeah, and I remember hearing about that. And Kovalchuk, is he? And I'm trying to think out of my head. Is he coming back to the NHL or did he?
Played for the Kings last year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And because I remember that was like the big storyline. Like he's going to the KHL because he can make more money, and that's just tempting for these players. Is if they can get paid more overseas, they're going to do that. And still the KHL's competitive hocky.
Well, so it's only 40-something games a year too in the KHL, and you're getting paid the same amount as you would, if not more, than in the NHL. So
you're getting paid bank.
Yes. You do have to
yeah.
live in Russia for a chunk of your year, though, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some cities are better than the other. But that'd be interesting to live in Russia. I feel like, I don't know. I haven't lived there, so I can't say experience how the experience is, but it's probably not as good of a living experience as the United States, but I don't know. I can't say it.
That's culture, Jake.
Culturalist. Shots taken. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry for all the Russians I've triggered. I'm so sorry. No, honestly, I never lived there. I don't know.
To trigger a Russian, man, they'll just knock you out before they get triggered.
I know, right? So I'm good. If I'm not knocked out, I'm good. I'm still standing. I wanted to talk about another pick that I thought was interesting is being that, we're not. I think a lot of Wild fans would agree that we're not 100% confident in our goalie going into the year with Devan Dubnyk. So the Wild did draft a goalie in that second round, Hunter Jones, and I'm kind of scratching my head at. I still thought there was some better goalies on the board, but he's playing for the Peterborough Petes. I think I got that right, in the OHL. He's played with them for like the last few years, and his stats really haven't been all that great. I think he in like 56 games last year or something like that, he had a 3.31 goals allowed, only 90% save percentage, just barely over 90%. And I think they went to the playoffs last year in 5 games. I think he had mid-80 save percentage, and he really hasn't looked that good. However, on paper, he hasn't looked that good, but I think why we picked him up is he's a big goalie. From the scouting notes I looked up, he's a big goaltender. He takes up a lot of the net. He doesn't go down to butterfly too early. So from what I'm hearing, he's a smart goalie, but he must have need more time to develop because the stats just aren't there yet. I don't know if you have any thoughts on
his style. Definitely sounds similar to Devan Dubnyk. Maybe they're trying to recreate that early magic that they did have with Devan Dubnyk with just a younger player, just develop them the way they want to.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking they're going for. Because I mean, I looked up some highlights. Like he's definitely a solid goalie. Like he's a big goalie in the net, but he's a little slow. But that kind of, like you said, they made a good point. Like that matches the description of Dubnyk in a way. But maybe they're trying to not wait to get a Dubnyk till he's 28 years old. Maybe they're trying to create one through their own system and have one for years to come. But we'll see. I mean, I think it is smart to draft a goalie that early to try to get one in the system. I know they got
a high investment.
Yeah, it's a high investment. I know they got Capo Kakkonen, I think.
That's a great name. I can't really say it either, but I love looking at it.
Yeah, it's awesome. But he's doing, I guess he's doing and I've seen a little bit when I watched a little bit of the Iowa Wild in the playoffs. He's doing, he's doing fairly well down in Iowa. I just think, from what I'm hearing is the talk is he's still maybe a year or two away from really coming up and playing in the NHL, but it's comfortable to kind of hear that we have a goalie down in the AHL right now that is kind of building up and improving to maybe be a guy that could maybe step in and take over Dubnyk if Dubnyk can't last. Not saying Dubnyk is going to isn't going to make it through the season or anything, or we're going to trade him next offseason or anything, because I hope for the best for him. I really want to see him do good. It's just in case if Dubnyk completely collapses, that we need someone to step in, whether we go out and sign somebody or get someone from the system. We're going to need to get a goalie.
It just all comes down to the consistency of Dubnyk this year.
Exactly. I think that's 100% where it comes down to this year. But I think leading into helping out Dubnyk on the roster, I think the Wild definitely tried to kind of create a better environment around the net, or create a better scoring environment for the Wild. So kind of lay off pressure on Dubnyk a little bit. And they did that by going and getting a couple players in free agency. They got Matt Zuccarello. I think it was a 5-year deal. And then they got Ryan Hartman.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are a couple, for Zuccarello, at least, he has some pretty impressive stats last year. I mean, he played in 48 games despite injury. I mean, despite injury, he has good stats, I should say. I shouldn't say 48 games despite injury. It makes no sense. But no, he played in 48 games. He had 12 goals, 28 assists, 40 points. That doesn't sound bad over a course of 48 games. And then Hartman, of course, played in 83 games because he played for, I believe, 2 teams last year. I think it was Philly and Nashville that he played for. I think he played Philadelphia at the end of the year, and he accumulated 12 goals and 14 assists, adding up to 26 points over the course of 83 games, which, kind of looks a little, a little bit of, not a high amount of points for the amount of games he played in, but he definitely is a smart player. He had good years. I think he had a 20 goal scoring year for the Blackhawks 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know what your take is on the signing, or what is your take on Zuccarello and Hartman?
Well, for Zuccarello, like there is a lot to like about Zuccarello. But first, let's just talk about that contract. That was like a 5-year deal. I don't have the cap hit right in front of me, but it's not friendly at all. Like through the 5 years, and so that means he's going to be signed for the Wild at a pretty decent cap hit until he's 37 years old. Yeah. That is kind of concerning, especially with the contracts we have with Suter and Parisi.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot to like about him. He has been like pretty consistent in getting points. He has scored 20 goals before in a season. He's never done it multiple seasons, but
yeah, right.
I mean, there wasn't too, I guess there could have been better options out there. In fact, there were better options out there in terms of goal scoring, but I like Zuccarello as a player, not the contract though.
I 100% agree. I was going to hit on that. I've heard of Zuccarello. Like he's kind of, I wouldn't say he's like a household name in the NHL, but he's definitely the name. Like if you hear Zuccarello to the hockey fan, like, oh yeah, I know who that is. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to have that on the Wild, like a name like that, a guy that can score. Like you said, there were better options, but when we signed Zuccarello, I was happy with it as a player because he can score, but I didn't agree with the contract. I think 5 years is way too long. It's going to he very well could last 5 years. He could have an awesome impact and play great for over 5 years, but or he could completely go down in his 3rd year and we're still stuck with him for 2 more years, or we'll have to try to buy him out if we want to completely get rid of him. I think it's just, we need to go, I think a 3-year contract would have been perfect for this to kind of gauge after 3 years. Okay, do we want to sign him then to 2 years after this?
That's why I also think he signed with Minnesota. I think Minnesota probably was the only team offering him a 5-year deal.
Yeah, and maybe that
because of what we do get him, but we also do risk paying a 37-year-old like $6 million or $5.5 million to produce 25 points or something like that.
Exactly.
So there's benefits and risks to both of them. In terms of Ryan Hartman, based off of what I saw in preseason, I really like this dude. He brings energy to the game. He scored in the preseason. He fought in the same game. I think in Chicago they even call him Andrew Luck 2.0. So I'm pretty excited because the Wild definitely need an energy player.
Well, exactly. And when they signed Zuccarello, I'm like, okay, Fenton's got to make a move for another player, sign another player. And I was very happy when we signed Hartman because I actually knew the player's name. It wasn't like Victor Rask or anything like that. And I quite frankly don't remember a lot of Hartman. I haven't watched a lot of Hartman over the last couple of years. I saw him play in Philadelphia a little bit last year, but I did watch him a lot when he played for Chicago, and that's because I think we saw a lot of him when the Wild were in a couple of playoff series against the Blackhawks, when he played on the Blackhawks. But I liked him on Chicago. I thought, as much as he wasn't a huge goal scorer, he still had an impact, brought a lot of energy, gets feisty out there. He creates plays, he gets assists and creates those plays. He's a playmaker, and I think he's a fast player that can really add a lot of energy to the team. And and in preseason, in a couple games I watched, he looked, he's a fast player, and he looks like he's bringing a lot of energy out there, and he can add a little bit of a flair to the team, along with some of these younger players. Because Ryan Hartman isn't super young; he's young, but he kind of adds that kind of middle-aged NHLer experience out there with the young players and the old players. So I think he'll connect really well out there, and I really like that signing along with Zuccarello. I think it'll be positive in the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and for some reason, we let Paul Fenton run the draft and free agent periods just to fire him immediately after. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? You want to explain the situation?
Well, I know that there were some of the hitting points on it were, I think the main point with Craig Leopold, I'll go into some smaller details, in a moment here, but I think the main point with Leopold, and you can kind of get the vibe. I mean, of course, we're not working in the front office. We don't know what it was like, but he was getting the vibe out of Fenton that he just didn't feel like when he was walking in the locker room that, there was a positive energy, or he just wasn't feeling a good culture developing, I guess, around Fenton when he was being the GM in the locker room, around the office, and he just didn't feel any optimism. Or he was talking about that in one of his in the press conference after he fired Fenton. He just didn't feel, happy about where the team was going, even though after one season. And I think it goes down to that Victor Rask Niederreiter trade and the Coyle and Granlund trade, and especially how we ended the season. I don't think he was comfortable how the season ended, and wasn't comfortable in how he was handling the draft in a free agency. Even though we got a guy like Zuccarello, I just don't think he was comfortable. I don't think he liked the culture. He had a vibe. It was the feeling in his heart.
And I personally
should
think
say.
that Wild fans should be pretty mad at Wild owner Craig Leopold right now, because there were tons of if the normal public is hearing that like the team as a whole is unhappy with it, as Minnesota Wild fans were hearing like right after the season, that means that there's definitely problems going on. And he knew that there were problems going on. He knew that the head coach was unhappy with him. He knew that there's just a lot of like bad situations that people didn't like the culture. Yet he was like, okay, we're gonna let him run it. I mean, I hate to say it, but if you're going to let him run the draft and free agency, just let him finish the season at this point, and let him do what he's trying to do at this point, because maybe there is some master plan. I'm not a fan of Fenton, but like the firing made no sense. The timing made no sense. And then we went half a summer without a GM when we could have maybe made a trade, where we could have tried to do something to spice the team up a little bit. It just kind of is frustrating.
Yeah, I think, and that's a good point, is the timing was just off, and that's what really threw me off. I guess I wasn't surprised we fired Fenton, because when I saw it, I was when I remember seeing it on my phone, I was actually not surprised. I'm like, but then I was thinking about like the timing is a little weird. Like you just went through a draft and free agency. You just signed a contract. You just got these contracts signed with Hartman and Zuccarello. Why are you firing him now? And I know there was something that was probably like the last straw. Like I know some of the little things were on like the first day of free agency, like Fenton went on vacation. And then another thing, not even sending a scout down to draft Victor Rask, and that's his job to do stuff like that, trying to get a trade done with Jason Zucker, which I think is really a big no-no in probably Leopold's eyes. I mean, they had a trade that fell through at the deadline last year with the Flames, and I don't think Leopold liked that. He tried to do that at all. I don't think Boudreau liked that one bit, to trade Zucker on top of Coyle, Granlund, and Niederreiter, and I think it just kind of all added up, and maybe he just like, no, I don't want to go with this guy throughout the season, but that timing didn't make any sense. It's like you should have just fired him at the end of the year if you already were not like, because obviously if you fired him then, you obviously were having doubts about him right at the end of the year. So as soon as you have doubts and there's not a good culture moving forward with the organization, and you don't feel any good vibes, you should just fire him there, because that's just ridiculous on the timing of it. Although going into it, now we got a guy like Bill Guerin. I know you have some, a lot of thoughts on him. I definitely think he's a good pickup, but it's just, again, that timing is weird. It would have been nice to have Guerin almost right at the end of the season, to kind of have a full summer with him.
And we'll get to Guerin in a second. But one thing going back to Fenton that I also really think could have hurt him was he ran the Predators draft. I think he was responsible for discovering Ryan Suter as a prospect. I think that he really was kind of arrogant and prided himself pretty much on the fact that was able to find like really good raw undeveloped talent, which forced him to make a really bad pick with Philip Johansson and stuff like that, And I just really think because he thought that he was so good in scouting that he really didn't have to do too much of the other job, which is just as important.
Right.
And going on vacation the very first day of free agency, even if you already have your stuff signed and stuff, that does not look good on anyone.
Yeah, I heard that because there was like an article, and there was more things in there. Like in the article when he was fired, it was in, I was reading it, there was a lot of little things, but like how stupid you have to be to take a vacation on the first day of free agency. You should be in the office, trying to figure things out. Yeah. I don't get it. It's just, it didn't make any sense to me. Along with the timing of the firing, it just made it look like when that happened that there was just so much distaste right now at the Wild organization, with a lot of fans, knowing in the behind the scenes that there's just kind of a mess they got to clean up. But I think it looks a little better with Guerin coming in. Season starting on Thursday, it's a new slate. But we'll see how it goes with him.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited for Bill Guerin. I know that's kind of hypocritical saying that, if you're going to fire Fenton that late, like you should have just given the rest of the chance. But like Bill Guerin, I really like him for a couple of reasons. One is because he's an established player. He's played over 1,000 games in the NHL, over 400 goals, over 800 points. He's in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, a 4-time All-Star, an All-Star Game MVP. I mean, the dude killed it as a player. He really, really did. In terms of management experience, in 2011, he was hired as the Pittsburgh Penguins player development coach. In 2014, he was promoted to the assistant GM of the Penguins. In 2016, they expanded his role to be the exclusive general manager of their AHL team. Then obviously in 2019, he signed with the Minnesota Wild. One important thing to note over his assistant GM tenure, the Pittsburgh Penguins won the Stanley Cup in 2016 and 2017. And I know that could be trivial. He's just the assistant GM. But what he did get to see is a team with a winning culture, how it's done, and how to do it from a GM who really knows what they're doing.
Exactly. I think that's the most important thing. And of course, he probably did have some impact in terms of scouting and making the right decisions in terms of some of the contracts. But of course, that's fully on the head general manager guy. But he knows what it's like when, especially going into those locker rooms on those winning Stanley Cup teams for the Penguins. What little things and what the players are talking about. What are the vibes like? What are they doing to prepare? And he'll be able to go in the locker room on Thursday night. I'm sure he already dealt with that a little bit in preseason. When we have a full roster on Thursday and we're playing in the first game of the season, he's going to be able to go in there and see what's going on and kind of, make tweaks and stuff like that. And I think players will also be more comfortable seeing him come in. They'll be like, this guy has won a couple Stanley Cups. Like,
they're going to respect the fact that he was a player and that he knows what he's doing and he's been there and he's done that.
Yeah, and I think it's important that Boudreau has a good relationship with him as well. And I think from what I've heard, he has had good ones so far. And I don't think he obviously probably was in disagreement with Fenton a lot. And I think so far he's gotten a good start with Bill Guerin. And I think that's super important to have with a head coach and general manager to create that winning culture and ultimately win, get to the playoffs and win the Stanley Cup. And Bill Guerin knows how to do it. He's been there. So I think
another thing to add too is that he also does have 9 years now of coaching / front office experience. And it's not like a, Peyton Manning situation where NFL teams are thinking of just throwing an ex-player as a GM. This is actually someone who cut their teeth, who actually knows what it's like to be an assistant GM, who knows what it's like to just be a coach or just be in charge of player development. And that also just I think that also will get a lot of respect with the management. So I think he's going to have not only the respect of management, but also the players. And I think that's going to be key.
Yeah, I think he's going to take what he learned from even watching the general manager in Pittsburgh. I'm blanking on his name because I knew it at one point. But
was it Mark Rutherford for a while? I don't remember if they got a new one though. But
yeah, they just got a new one. But whoever it is, obviously the Penguins are successful franchise, winning those back-to-back Stanley Cups. He was under that general manager's wing. He saw what he was doing to build a winning culture instead of just seeing, oh, well, our team's just good, we have Crosby. There's things that go beyond that than just having Crosby on the ice to win 2 Stanley Cups in a row. So, and he saw that, and he's going to have definitely more respect, like you said, with the whole organization.
And he did make a few moves. He re-signed Kevin Fiala, who was a restricted free agent. He made a huge decision and re-signed Jared Spurgeon to the biggest cap hit in Wild history, more than Zach Parise and Suter make per year. Yeah. So it seems like he does know what he wants to do. He also brought in Drew Stafford for a tryout, who ended up getting cut.
Yeah.
He didn't really have much to do, considering that free agency was already over and the draft was already done, and any points for major tweaks have to wait now until next offseason. So he just pretty much has to sit on the roster.
Yeah, and of course, unless anything happens at the trade deadline, but I don't really see. It's hard to say right now. That's the trade deadline. We can talk about that in January, but
yes.
but yeah, I think to have signed Fiala like that, because you definitely re-sign him. I mean, obviously, or else that if we don't re-sign him, that's stupid because we got him for Granlund, and it was going to happen. It was just depending by how much it was going to be and how many years, and then getting that Spurgeon the deal. I love that deal. 7 years is it's hard to kind of look at 7 years, but he is a young player and he's a franchise player. I don't think you ever want to give up Spurgeon. He's been the most consistent defenseman.
His contract only takes him until 34, 35, around there. So it's not like he signed until he's 38 or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he definitely is a player where he could be good till he's 38 anyway. So I think by 35, he'll still be good. Hopefully he's on a good trajectory to be a consistent player in the NHL. He's probably our most consistent, smartest player on the team as of right now. And I'm just glad to have him for that many more years, because I love watching the kid play. he's fun to watch, and he can score goals, create plays, and he's just super speedy, and he can compete with some of the best teams in the NHL. The way he plays.
Yeah, he definitely he's getting paid like Minnesota's top defenseman now. So
Yeah.
I think he probably is a top defenseman. I mean, yeah, Suter's there, but Suter is getting older, and since Suter's getting up there in age, I honestly think that they are going to be relying on Spurgeon more and more as the year goes on. So let's move on to preseason because we're both fans of Guerin, but he just really didn't get a chance to do too much considering like, the timing of how everything happened.
Right, exactly.
So the Wild had 6 preseason games this year. I think it's normally 6. I don't know, but they played 3 teams, home and away is how they go. They played Dallas, Winnipeg, and Colorado. They ended up going 2, 1, and 3 throughout that. Jake, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, preseason, it's kind of like, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, being like, it's kind of like the NFL. They don't play 100% of your starters, but the thing is, the Wild did. And they looked like they're struggling a little bit. And one thing I noticed is they couldn't seem to figure it out in overtime.
Yep.
And I know this is preseason.
1 and 3 overtime losses.
And we saw this last year and the year before. It's a trend of going into overtime and losing on those. It's like they can't figure out 3 and 3 overtime. Last year, I would look at as soon as they went in overtime, I'd almost just wrap around the thought that we're going to lose this game. Just give us the point. And that's one thing I want to improve on, and certainly it's preseason. Hockey changes. Hockey in the NHL, things change very quickly, very rapidly. But as of right now, we're still looking like in the preseason, we're looking like how we did last year, and not being able to close out games and win games in overtime and extra time to get those critical points that will come to be impactful at the end of the season. And another thing I noticed too, and you'd probably agree, is we did have trouble scoring and a couple points in the preseason. Losing 2-1 in overtime to Dallas, and then losing 4-1 against Winnipeg in the second game, and so on. There was just points where we couldn't score. And even
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
In 4 of the 6 preseason games, the Wild scored 2 goals or less. That was like their win against Dallas, their loss against Colorado, their loss against Winnipeg, and their loss against Dallas.
Yeah, and in a game, even and they had that Colorado game where they scored 4 goals, which was a win against Colorado. But then in a game in Winnipeg where they actually scored, they tied for their most goals in the preseason, which was 4 goals. They lost in overtime 5-4, and that also brings
like 5 goals on 28 shots and didn't look good at all.
Yeah, and it just comes on the preseason. It's kind of looking like the same old. But there are some positives coming out of it. Zuccarello I thought he looked good, like he's fitting in well in a preseason. And then Ryan Hartman, like you were saying, he looks super energetic, high energy in the preseason, and I'm definitely excited to see it. Yeah. Yeah,
Matt Dumba's been scoring goals as well, which has been awesome to see because he was definitely leading defenseman in goals scored. And when he got hurt last year, so it's awesome to see that he still has his goal scoring touch with him. See, Jake, I'm an optimist, so I like to leave the Wild fans a little bit of optimism, and that is 5 out of the 6 games we got a point. What do you think of that?
It's better than I'll tell you now. It'd be better. It's better than looking at it and seeing 2, 3, and 1. We got points. You need to scrap up points. In the NHL. But I want to see us win these overtime games. It gets frustrating. You're going to lose some games in overtime when you're starting to lose a lot of them. That you're leaving. Eventually, if you lose 10 of them, you're leaving 10 points on the ice, and it just accumulates, and you cannot do that. And it's just, I'm hoping it's not going in that trend. But again, they're 2, 1, and 3. It's not terrible. It's preseason. It's way different than the regular season. It's a new slate on Thursday. But looking at the preseason, some of the things that you could see when you watch it, I wasn't too impressed with some of the things, but there's still some positives to take out of it, definitely.
At 3 games ended in overtime, we ended up losing those all. 3 games ended in the regular session, and we won 2 of them.
Yeah. So yeah, we're 2 and 1 in the regular session games. It's just those overtime games that are just that look bad, that make us look like we're not improving on that part of the game in which we need to. So
I think we're gonna move on to the roster. So right now you can see on your screen
wherever it is.
Like a depth chart kind of cut out of what the Minnesota Wild depth chart is going to look like. I think what we're going to start off by talking about is their recent cuts. So literally today, what is it, Monday? What's the date? The 30th, September 30th?
Yep.
Yeah, literally today they made their final cut. So their last 5 cuts were Drew Stafford, Gary Mayhew, Nico Strum, Louis Bellapito, and JT Brown. So they end up getting cut. So that means that our healthy players are probably going to be Victor Rask, Carson Sosi, and then we also have Patterin, a defenseman who's on injured reserve right now.
Now, I mean, I'm very excited when you look at some of these guys that got cut but are sent down to Iowa, like Nico Sturm, a guy that came out of, I think it was Clarkson last year, that came in and played for us at the end of the year when his season ended. You know, I'm excited to see him possibly play in the AHL, develop as a player. But yeah, not surprised by like a guy, Drew Stafford, that we brought in for a trial, get cut. But I'm very when I'm looking at the starting lineup, though, going to the starting roster, you know, it's just, I think a lot of people would be scratching their heads like, why the hell is Victor Rask in the 4 spot or 5 spot center or whatever? But I think you were talking about before this podcast that they almost need to keep him in the lineup.
Yeah, due to his salary cap hit, they pretty much need to keep him up there. But no one's going to argue that Gary Mayhew and Nico Strum had a worse camp than
Right.
Rask. But here's the thing: do you want a good young prospect like any of those guys to be sitting on the bench, crossing their fingers someone gets hurt or plays bad so they can get a shot? And the answer is no, you don't. Rask is pretty much trying to be nice, I guess. It's pretty much it's okay for him to be a healthy scratch. Yeah, we're wasting $4 million a year on him, but like if he sits on the bench, whatever, at least we're not hurting his development because he's already 26, 27, already pretty much at his peak.
Exactly. I think it's definitely, it makes sense for that. But yeah, it would be nice to see like a prospect, you know, like Gary Mayhew or Nico Sturm come out and you know, even early in the season to try to make an impact, see what they can do in the big leagues. Because I think it definitely worth it to try to develop a guy quicker than that than just try to play Victor Rask, who a guy who has struggled in the NHL. But yeah, it's with the cap and, you know, the $4 million a year or whatever. It's just almost, we got to leave him in there. But beyond that, you know, the lineup, of course, as you could see, you know, looks fairly, you know, similar to last year. You just obviously now you have Matt Zuccarello and then Ryan Hartman in there. And I don't know how much, you know, we'll definitely see how much of an impact that makes on the season. I think we'll definitely gauge a little bit in the first game, but I like, I mean, we'll definitely see these, I think these lines change throughout the season, even in the first month.
Like, I think that the hottest line is going to be going out there and playing. And so that's actually pretty exciting. I really like that because that means that like any given game, anyone can be like the hero or anyone is going to get an opportunity to step up. I think if Minnesota Wild was going to perform well this year, those trades that Fenton made last year for those young players, those players have to play like top 6 players. And so that's a question we need to ask right now. Is Kevin Fiala, is Ryan Donato, are they top 6 forwards in the NHL?
Yeah, it's hard to say right now. Like I almost can't answer that. Like I think they very well could be. As of right now, I don't. But I should say I don't think they are right now. I think Donato is definitely, maybe if you wanted to put someone in as a top 6 forward, I think Donato is more so there than Fiala. Being we saw some good play by Donato last year. If we got him from Coyle, I should say, excuse me. But we got Donato. He had some good play. We saw out of him. I know he had a big overtime goal. I think it was like his first goal.
In 22 games for the Wild last year, he had 16 points. So pretty good.
It's pretty good. And I know that I think it was his first goal where it was in overtime against the Blues when the Blues were kind of in their heat of getting on fire. And winning a lot of games. And I think he got the game-winning goal in overtime. I think it was like his first goal in Wild uniform, if I'm not mistaken. And he definitely looks, when he gets going, you know, he really can play. But I think at the end of the year, you know, he really kind of looked a little sluggish, wasn't really doing a whole lot. But then again, the rest of the team really wasn't doing anything. But I'm excited to see these young guys, see how they can play. You know, like Fiala, we know what Cunnin is like. You know, he's definitely, I think Cunnin's going to he still has a lot to prove, but I think he still has a lot to develop. I still think he can become a really good player, but it's going to be fun to see Fiala and Donato and see them play and see how they develop throughout the course of the season and see if they can really turn into some of those top 6 forwards that we, not only for this season, but for the future in the years down the road.
And see, every single player actually on our team has like the potential, I want to say, besides Marcus Foligno, or how do you say his name? Foligno?
Foligno, yeah.
Yeah, Marcus Foligno. He's played on the team for 2 years. I should have that down by now. But
right.
The whole key is that we have a bunch of young players that could be good, but it's a matter of them reaching their potentials, right? So we got Kevin Fiala, we got Luke Kunin, we got Jordan Greenway, we got Erickson Ek, we got Ryan Donato, right? If those 5 players actually, they all could one day be top 6 forwards. It just matters when. And I'm not sure if it's yet. I'm not sure if the time is now.
Exactly. And you bring it reminds me of Joel Eriksson Ek. He's another player that, I wasn't high on him a year ago. And now he actually has been looking a little better. He's like improving a little bit. He wasn't a guy that we were looking at him, I think, when we drafted him as a guy that can come in and score or be a fast player. And he wasn't doing that.
Yeah, we drafted him like 3 picks before Brock Besser, like an absolutely beast of a goal scorer.
Yeah, and exactly. And Eriksson Ek, I was kind of just always waiting on him the last few years. Like come on, get into things. And he has, I think, been getting a little bit more into fruition here in the last year and a half. And he has been looking better, in my opinion. I think he needs to still get better, but I do like Eriksson Ek, what he's becoming. I think he's improved over the course of the last couple of years, but he still has a lot
for him to catch up to the physical aspect of the game. But I think he finally has. He also always decimates that wild conditioning test they have at the beginning of the year. Like he sets team records every year, every single time he takes it. So his conditioning and his work ethic is off the chart. We just need to see him handle a physical game better.
Exactly. And I think that's definitely a hot take on Eriksson Ek. But I think just one more thing to hit on the roster. When you look at the defense, you have probably the best 4 defensemen in probably the NHL.
The best top 4 pairings.
Yeah, best top 4 pairing. Yeah, exactly. You got it. So like Dumba, Spurgeon, Brodin, Suter, these are some top tier defensemen. When you look below that and you see Sealer, Hunt, and I do like Susi or Suchi or whatever, however you say his name. I do like him, but you got Patterin, who's been, so-and-so. He's
he'll probably actually take either Hunt or Sealer's spot when he does return from injury reserve.
Right, and I think that'd be better. But you look at that bottom 4 defense is where it's a little iffy for me. Looking at it and seeing how they could really, adapt after, when they need that third defensive pairing to go out there, to give the top 2 a break. It's a little concerning to see how those guys will perform this season.
See, last year Matt Dumba went down after like 32 games or whatever, and for the rest of the season, the team still finished like 13th in goals against, which is still technically playoff caliber, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, even with the Dumba injury, so if this top 4 stays healthy, they're going to be great. But an injury to I think this is true to any NHL team. And one injury to anyone in your top 4 pairing defensemen, your team's going to get dragged down a lot by that. And that's especially true with Minnesota, and we saw that last year.
Yeah, exactly. I think that hits it on the head on the coffin. I think if one of those players gets injured, I think it's dire to the team. I think it's just huge that this team stays healthy because we don't have a lot of that depth as some NHL teams do. But it is dire like any other NHL team. But we got to make sure that we keep those players healthy and try to move forward in the season.
Do you have any other notes on the roster you want to get out there?
No, I think we hit everything. Honestly, I think that was the most important points. We'll just, there'll be definitely that's a lot based on our preseason view of it. We'll have a lot more, I think, to talk about after the first game of the season.
So Jake and I, in a second, are going to give you guys our predictions and hot takes for this upcoming Minnesota Wild season. But before, go ahead and check out our buddy Bubba give his.
It's time for Bubba's Takes.
This is Bubba with Bubba's Hot Takes. First off, I'd like to say Kirk Cousins is a god-awful quarterback, and we should have kept Case. But that's neither here nor there. I want to talk about another team from Minnesota that'll eventually break our hearts, as we all know that every other damn sports franchise in the state does. Tonight I want to talk about Foligno. I want Foligno to get the C, but I'll talk about that in a minute. I want to talk about Dumba, Hartman, and a guy that I like to refer to as Jay-Z, Jason Zucker. He's just a babe, man. But that's neither here nor there at the moment. I want to talk about Dumba first. Dumba is a stud from heaven. I'll tell you, if there's a bright spot on this team, it's Matthew Dumba. And I'll tell you why. Matt Dumba last year in 32 games had 12 goals and 10 assists. And that was just in 32 games, which is a great pace for scoring for a defenseman. I'll say it right now. He's the best power play. I'd take him over Drew Doughty, PK Subban on the power play. I mean, that slap shot is just bitching, man. I honestly think his defense, he's a defenseman. I think his defensive skills needs to get better, but I think that would have improved last year if he would have played a whole freaking season, not for that bum Bender up in Calgary, and I'm not even gonna say his name because he just gets me in a bad mood. But he got into a fight. I think he had a pectoral or shoulder problem from that fight and was out for the rest of the year, which is just horrible. But I think Matt Dumba was on pace, or was a serious contender for the James Norris Memorial Trophy. If you don't know that, that's the top defenseman and offensive defense. It's overall the best defenseman in the league. I can't talk. Dumba is one of these guys that will be a franchise player, and I don't have my notes in front of me. I didn't research this part, but I think eventually he should get an A. He should get the A. I think it's time to change up the captains. But I'm not going to talk about that tonight. But I'm going to talk about the C guy, and that's next. Foligno, man, I'll tell you. He's got a hockey family that is just amazing. His brother plays out in Columbus, I think his dad played out for the Buffalo Sabre. I don't know, I'm going to have to fact check that later. But last year, the Wild didn't have a great season, and he called out everybody. He called out Ryan Suter, he called out Stahl. When Granlund was here before he got traded out to that dumbass city out in Nashville. I love Nashville, I'm just kidding, it's not a dumbass city. But as Jake likes to say, the guy on before that brought it to me, he just doesn't care. He throws his body around and plays hard. A lot of these guys give up, and I'm tired of that. I want him to get the C. Mikko, I know, tore his ACL last year, which is a god-awful injury. He's getting up there in age. It could have ended his career. But I'll tell you one thing. There's no one in this lineup that I'm looking at right now that has more heart than Foligno. And if Foligno doesn't get the C, I'll be very disappointed. He probably won't. But that's neither here nor there at this point of the stage because Mikko has the C. What are you going to do? Should I start not a pension, what do you call it? One of those things, a petition where I start, Foligno should get the C, Marcus Foligno's the best. No. I should, but I'm not because I don't have that time. I got work and shit. But anyway, if Foligno doesn't get the C, which he probably won't, and it won't surprise me if he doesn't, or even an assistant can, just call out anybody who's not playing hard like he did last year. Foligno will be good. Now, one of the things in the offseason, as we all know, Paul Fenton was just a god-awful GM. He made trades that made no sense at all. But Zuccarello, I like the signing, but I don't like the amount and how many years he got signed for. And this team needs help scoring goals, and I don't think he's the best. He wasn't the best candidate to score goals. I understand you got to work with what you got. There's no way in hell they were going to get Panarin or whatever, Panera or whatever. But this Ryan Hartman kid, man, he has a lot of potential. I was looking over some of the stats. He was a first-round draft pick from the Blackhawks in 2013. He went 30th overall. This is a guy, if the Wild make it to the playoffs, which I'm not, very skeptical of them making it to the playoffs. Hartman is going to be a guy you're going to want and on that third line. Hell, I'd move him to the second line because he has potential to score goals. If he, let's see, in 2016 with Chicago, he scored 19 goals and he had 12 assists. He had 31 points all around in 75 games, or 76 games. It's not a, That's not your. I don't know the fucking word. That's not. Ideal for a top-notch scorer, but he's a guy that gets down and dirty. He's not afraid to get in the he's not afraid to get in the corners with big boys like Bufflin. Represent Roseau, baby. I love you, Dustin. But if this guy, if we get into the playoffs, he's a guy that will drop the gloves, and he's not afraid to push people around. We've seen it in the preseasons. He's gotten into a couple fights already, which I love. I understand the game's going in another direction. I get it. It's not old-time hockey anymore. And I personally, I don't really give a fuck about the fights. I really don't. But I want a guy just like Foligno who has heart. That's all. I love a guy who hustles. That's all I care about. We signed him for 2 years, 3.8 mil. 3.8 mil. I mean, there is potential there. I think it's a little bit high. He can put the puck in the net. I think last year he was with Philly and Nashville, and he scored like 14 goals, 12 assists. I don't know. I threw my notes away. But one thing Paul Fenton did was he got a guy with heart and soul. And that's what I like about. That's the only thing I like that Paul Fenton did. And as I said, if we get to the playoffs, he's a guy that I want out there because I know he's gonna play his ass off. Now I want to talk about Jason Zucker, man. This guy is a babe. He can put the puck in the net, but last year, man, he did not do that. I think he had. Let me check my notes. Oh. Yeah, 21 goals, 21 assists. That's I need more from him. Jay-Z, I know you can put the puck in the net. I think 2 years ago you scored 40 goals or something like that. 30 goals. You have the potential, buddy. Just do it. Just do it. And you play hard too. You got heart. I know you can. And I remember watching you at the WCHA Frozen 4 years ago. Dude, you were a bomb-ass player. And you're a guy that needs to be on top of the list. You should be a perennial all-star. So that's all I have to say about that. Next, and finally, I want to talk about the Minnesota Wild as a whole and what I expect for the season. They start on Thursday against Nashville. I think I don't expect them to make the playoffs this year, which is really sad. But if Dubnyk plays good, which he always does, he's a guy that gets over 28 wins a year. And last few years he's had 30 wins. But he needs to stop being lazy, and he just needs to play out of his mind. And I think if the Wild do get to the playoffs, it's going to be because of him. And like guys like Jay-Z putting the puck in the net, him and Zach Parise. And I'm looking, Donato needs to step the fuck up. Stahl, I mean, fuck, you didn't want to get traded last year. You wanted to stay close to Thunder Bay, which is up in Ontario, about 6 hours. Get it to fuck together. This is what I'm talking about. The Twins, you're doing great. I hope you win the series. The Vikings, they suck. This is it, man. This team, I expect to make the playoffs, but as I said, they're not going to do shit. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the division or the conference, the Central Division, but we're in the best division in the NHL. We need to get it together. We need to fucking play hard. And if we don't do that, well, I mean, as a Minnesota fan, nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing baffles me. Nothing. I'm not scared of nothing. Just get to the playoffs. We saw it this year. We got guys like Hartman and Foligno. Just drop the gloves and play hockey, baby. This is Bubba Takes. I hope you liked it. Peace the fuck out.
Thank you, Bubba, for your hot takes.
Yeah, thank you very much, buddy. Very entertaining as always. Now it's time for Jake and I to give our predictions and hot takes for this upcoming Wild season. First one is going to be, do you think the team's going to make the playoffs? Jake, I'll hand this one off to you.
As of right now, it's honestly hard to say. NHL is funny and weird, but if everything stays healthy, and with the additions of Zuccarello and Harmon, I think we'll make the playoffs. Although, how far we're going to make it, I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I think that we're not going to make the playoffs. Preseason proved to me that we still suck 3-on-3, and it also proved to me that we still suck scoring goals. We're trying to ask someone, Ryan Zuccarello, who's never had to be the primary goal scorer on his team, to potentially score 30 goals this year, which he's never done. We're asking Zucker to be way better than he was last year when he only got 42 points. We're asking also a lot of young prospects to be stepping up. And let's say even all that happens, which I think, hey, there could be a chance all this stuff lines up right and it does happen. We're still in the Central Division, the toughest division by far, where I think there's 7 teams in the Central, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so out of the 7 teams, I think 5 of the Central teams are going to make the playoffs, and 3 teams from the Pacific are going to make the playoffs, meaning that both wild card spots are going to be held by Central Division teams this year. That's just such a deep division, you know.
Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So going on, who do you think is going to be the team MVP?
You know, I really have kind of like 3 guys that I'm thinking of. It's hard to put it down to one, but I'm thinking it's going to either be Spurgeon, Parise, or Zuccarello. And it comes down to, I know that I think it's a big thing that Dumba could lead the NHL in scoring by a defenseman, but I think Spurgeon, you know, I think he's going to put up enough assists, maybe even enough goals to prove himself as maybe being worthy as team MVP and being a big impact on that defensive side and helping out on that part of the ice. But I think if it comes down to Parise or Zuccarello, it'll come to Parise just having another stellar year, as old as he is, and maybe even a better year, and we cruise into the playoffs. But then Zuccarello being the new guy, he just continues what he did in his 48 games last year, brings it in this season as a totally healthy year. I think if he has a full-on healthy year, continues in the momentum he had last year, I think he could easily win team MVP.
I agree. Any of those guys could win it.
Yeah.
I have a really hot take, so I'm going to save it for the hot takes. But if I'm going to go safe right now, and this is even not safe, right?
Right.
I'm going Matt Dumba as a team MVP. He can lead the league in goals as a defenseman, you know. So, you know, if he is healthy all year, which hopefully he will be, I think that he's going to be amazing.
I agree.
Yep. And then I got one last question for you before we get into our hot takes. Which AHL player that starts the year with Iowa has the biggest chance of getting called up mid-season and making an impact on this Minnesota Wild roster?
I think the biggest guy right now, and to me, easily, it would probably be Nico Sturm, the guy that we got out of Clarkson last year. I mean, in 39 games out in Clarkson, you know, he had 14 goals, 31 assists, and 41 points. And he came in last year and actually looked like he still needs to develop a little bit, get involved with it, but he's a big physical guy that can get up front and really beat up some players. So I think, you know, if we're lacking in some of that talent or needed someone to come and fill in a role of an injured player, I think he definitely will have the highest chance of coming up and definitely making an impact for the Wild.
That's really, really smart choice. I actually almost picked him, but in the end, I decided to go with Gary Mayhew. And the reason is because last year he actually set an Iowa Wild franchise record with the most goals in a season by an Iowa Wild player, which was 27. And obviously, the Minnesota Wild have had issues with scoring goals, so maybe he could be the answer. You don't know, but that's my prediction for who's going to come up in the middle of the season and potentially make a big impact.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Gary Mayhew and Nico Sturm are probably the 2 guys that have the biggest chances right now. As of right now, that would probably be called up from our affiliate down in Des Moines, Iowa.
So now it's everyone's favorite time. It's hot take time. Jake, give us 3 hot takes about this Minnesota Wild season. Let's hear them.
Okay, first one, I don't like Sealer or Hunt. I think they're sluggish, slow defensemen. Hunt only had 5 points in 29 games last year. I think it was utterly stupid to pick him up. I like that he's a homegrown guy, or I mean, he played for Bemidji at least. I know that much. But I mean, come on. He's slow out there. He could not compete. I think we even moved him up the forward at one point. Like, what are you doing? I just didn't like that. And Sealer, I mean, he shows potential, but my God, I swear he deflected so many pucks into our own net just by standing right in Dubnyk and going down in the kneeling position. Like, what are you doing? Come on, man, do something better. So I don't like either of those defensemen. I think they could slow us down. Now, my second hot take, I think Fiala, Donato, and Cunnin will all at least have 10 goals this year. And I think Donato or Fiala will definitely have over 20 goals, maybe even both. I think that may be a little too far, but I think one of them will get over 20 goals this year. I think, and I just think some of those young guys will come together. One of them will pop out more than the rest throughout the year. But, of course, time will tell. And then my third one is, as much as people still don't like him, I still like that Koivu's on the team for now. I think he adds veteran presence. I think he's a smart playmaker that we were lacking last season when he was out. I still like Koivu on the team, even though he's getting old. He's kind of a burden on our cap. I do still like that he's on the team, and I have a wild card take. I think
let's hear the wild card take.
Wild card take. I think if Dubnyk does not find consistency this season, he will be gone in the offseason, and we'll be looking for a new goalie.
Oh my God, that was a hot take right there.
Mm-hmm.
Jake Bringgold, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm on fire. No.
I guess I'll go ahead and I will dive into my 3 hot takes. My very first one today is that Matt Dumba will lead the NHL in goals by a defenseman this year. When he got injured last year, he was already leading the league in goals by a defenseman. He has an amazing shot, deadly on the power play. I think the whole power play is pretty much just set up to get Matt Dumba a one-timer. My second hot take of the year is that Ryan Donato is going to score 25 goals for the Minnesota Wild this year and be team MVP. See, I needed to say that hot take. I honestly love this kid. 16 points in 22 games for the Wild last year. In Boston, he was unmotivated. He was on the fourth line. I think that Coyle played good in the playoffs for Boston, but I really, really think that we won this trade, actually. I really, really like Donato. Huge fan. My very final take for today is not one that many Minnesota Wild fans are going to be happy with, or any Minnesota Wild fan for that matter. And that is that Jason Zucker is going to have less than 40 points this year.
No.
I know, right? I don't want to say it. I like Jason Zucker, and I hope I'm wrong. Last year, though, he only had 42 points in 81 games, 21 goals, 21 assists. That was down from the year before, and I think might have even been down the year before that. So obviously, he was on the market a lot, and he was trying to get traded a lot by Fenton. I honestly think that he is unhappy, and he does not want to be in Minnesota anymore. Even with the new GM, I really am wondering where Zucker's head is at. And I guess, are we throwing in wild card takes now? Is that what we're doing?
I just had that. I kind of just thought of it. Wild card take. I don't care.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do a wild card take. My wild card take is that Parise, despite what everyone is saying, is actually still motivated and still ready to go and still is going to win a Stanley Cup before he's retired. That's a super hot take.
You know what might be even hotter?
It will not be with the Wild, right? Because I honestly think another team might take him if the Wild suck this year. I think that the Wild will trade him, and I think that some team might go for him.
That's hot, but I think even
does that.
The hotter take is he is going to win a Stanley Cup, but it is going to be with Minnesota.
Oh,
it's going to happen before he retires.
The hottest. You're in hell with that take, buddy.
Oh, man. I'm in hell with that. That's a hot take right there. Oh, we don't have time for cold takes here. We don't have time for that.
It's cold here anyways, man.
It's just way too cold, and it's getting colder already. It's October.
This has been the WildTakes podcast. Jake and I are going to do this once a month, and our buddy Bubba will be there along the way as well. Thank you very much for sticking with us, and we'll see you next month. Isn't that right, Jake?
Yeah, we'll see you next month, and make sure to go on 10,000takesmn.com. Check out our Wild blog, and we write about any other thing Minnesota as well, but specifically this is about the Wild. Check out our Wild blog. Check out our other content. Check us out on Instagram and Twitter. We hope you guys see us soon. Check out the rundown that happens also, or that's released every Tuesday, where we just talk about general all Minnesota sports.
Weather is cold enough. We don't need cold takes. See you next time.
See you next time, guys. Bye.